If you're like me and you're a guy with no social life, no girlfriend, no wife, and also especially if you're unemployed, all of those factors put you in a particularly vulnerable position when it comes to the devil's lettuce. I used to believe all the positive propaganda. I bought into all the talking points like, it's not addictive, bro. It's just a plant. It's natural, bro. It's not addictive. I thought it was something that could boost your creativity. I thought it would make me a more interesting person. But literally all of that is wrong. I started using it at a pretty early age when I was like 15 or 16. The first time I tried it, it was because I was curious about it. I just wanted to know what it would feel like. But over time, it became a habitual thing, something I was doing every day. And I also kind of tried to lean into it and make it part of my identity because I've always been a loner. I had crippling social anxiety, and I still do, but for a while back in high school, I tried to niche max as a stoner because I thought maybe that would get me noticed. Maybe that would make people think I was cool. I guess it kind of worked to some degree. It wasn't super effective. I'm in my 30s now, and I've still never been with a woman, and I never actually made any friends. But since I started at such an early age, I think that permanently altered my brain chemistry and made it so no matter what I do, I'll always be craving it. Even at times in my life when I have managed to go almost a full year without smoking, I always still crave it. Then when I do cave, it's never actually a good experience. It used to be fun when I was younger. Now it just makes me super anxious and hyper aware of my own mortality. So today I'm going to tell you why I think weed is especially harmful for guys in the chronically lonely position. If you are a guy that suffers from social anxiety, if you're a guy that is a loser, for a lack of a better term, like you've always been unsuccessful with the ladies, you're unsuccessful in maintaining friendships, or just unsuccessful in most things in general, then listen up. Because weed is not helping you with any of those things. And it's probably not neutral either. It's probably making everything worse for you. Okay, so first of all, I do get why there was so much pro-ganja propaganda when I was growing up, because in the past there was a lot of negative propaganda about it that was also factually misleading. So all the pro-propaganda was an overreaction to all the propaganda in the other direction. And I will say, I know that there are people that maybe smoke a bowl once a month or something like that, and they're able to use it in moderation. But those are outliers. Most people cannot use it like that. Everybody thinks they're that guy that's just going to use in moderation, but very, very few of us actually are that guy. So forget about that, okay? The chances of you being that guy that actually uses responsibly are slim to none, okay? You're not that guy. And it's a lot easier to refrain if you just never tried it in the first place. So my number one piece of advice, if you're listening to this and you've never tried it before and you're thinking about it, just don't. It's a lot easier that way. And honestly, you're not missing out on much. All it does is make you less bored, basically. That's the effects in a nutshell. You're better off reading a book or binge watching loser maxing videos. It'll get you to the same place. Well, reading a book will get you to the same place. I promise you, a good book will cure your boredom just as well as a fat joint, and it's far more sustainable. Okay, so I don't want to waste your time. There are two main reasons why weed is so dangerous for guys that are already struggling in life. One of those reasons has to do with anxiety. Supposedly, for some people, it can actually make them feel less anxious. I've heard that's the case. I've heard for some people it can lower their inhibitions, and maybe that's true, But just like the guy that's able to use in moderation, you would be a fool to believe that you are that guy that's going to rip the vape and then all of a sudden all your worries just melt away. What is far more likely to happen is that being stoned will increase your anxiety and it will raise your inhibitions, not lower them. There's a million testimonials you can read online where people talk about their experiences with the stuff, and for most people, weed is an anxiety booster. It does not lower inhibitions or help with your anxiety in any way for the majority of people. And even if it does feel like it helps at first, if you keep using it habitually, you will eventually get to the point where it starts making you more anxious. That's how it happens for most habitual users. But since it actually is highly addictive, even if it gets to the point it's giving you panic attacks when you use it, it'll still be hard to stop if you've made a habit of it. Again, there's a million testimonials you can read about online where people hate how they feel when they're on it, but they still can't stop doing it because it's just addictive. Okay, so let me elaborate on that a bit. Because you've probably heard some people say it's not addictive at all, then other people say, well, it's not physically addictive, but it can be psychologically addictive. Look, the stuff is addictive, plain and simple. If you toke up and you like it and you do it again, then you'll probably do it again and again and again. And then eventually you'll realize somewhere along the way that you got to the point where getting stoned is your main priority, that you prioritize above everything else. Scientifically speaking, it's highly addictive psychologically, just like adult videos or gambling can be highly addictive. But it is also physically addictive to some degree. It's obviously not as bad as other things, such as opiates or something like that, but it is addictive. You will have some form of withdrawal whenever you stop using it after a long period of using. Like you'll have trouble sleeping, it might affect your appetite, and just little things like that. Nothing too serious. You can definitely quit cold turkey without worrying about dying in your sleep, but it is addictive physically to some degree. But that's really neither here nor there. All you need to know is that it is highly addictive. It's just as addictive as tobacco or alcohol, period. If it wasn't, then there wouldn't be so many people that want to quit, but they can't. Okay, so it's obviously just as addictive as alcohol or tobacco. That's not saying it's necessarily just as dangerous. I know that an alcoholic is usually going to have much worse health consequences from their addiction, but it is just as addictive. It's just as hard to quit once you get started. I know for me, it's just been a struggle I've been living with for almost 20 years now. By the way, if you're wondering how a guy like me with crippling social anxiety even managed to procure the stuff in the first place, it's pretty simple. I had long hair when I was a teenager, and I got approached by multiple different people asking me if I wanted to buy some. I always see these people commenting on Reddit like, "What's the deal with all those anti-drug just say no PSAs? Where were all these people going around offering drugs when I was in high school?" Well, in my case, all it took was having long hair. I grew my hair out for the first time over the summer between 8th and 9th grade, and the next year at school, people started trying to sell me weed in the hallways. Or not trying, they did sell me weed. And I still have a connection to this day that I know from back then. I'm on a really good streak right now, but it would still be easy to get it anytime, especially now that it's legal in half the country. But yeah, I started when I was 15, I think, and I've been wanting to quit since I was around 20 or 21. And I have had some pretty long, clean streaks, especially back when I lived in a different state from where I'm from. I wouldn't smoke at all except for once or twice a year when I visited home. But then it became legal in the state I was living in, so then it got really bad for me for a while. because it was so easy to just go down to the store and choose from an assortment of products. But yeah, it's just really hard to quit once you make it a habit. And if you think like, no, I'm strong willed, it'll be different for me. If that's what you think, then stop watching adult videos and stop jerking it. Seriously, you might be able to successfully do that for some period of time, but you will relapse and you will always want to do it. You will always struggle with that urge, okay? Weed addiction is exactly the same. The urge is always there. Just like the way when you see a hot woman, it makes you really want to crank it. There are certain triggers that'll make you really want to spark up. For me, a big one is just being outside in nature on a nice summer day. That always gives me the urge. And it sucks because you can't just never go outside when it's nice out. And you shouldn't avoid going outside on a nice day. But that will always be a trigger for me. And it's hard every single time I feel the sun on my skin. It's hard to not just pull out my phone and shoot a text to my guy. Every single time. Just like every time you see an attractive woman, you probably feel some type of way. You know, the sight of that woman makes you want to do certain things. The only difference is I can very easily do the thing that I have an urge to do. And there's other triggers too, you know, like hearing certain songs or thinking about certain video games or when a new game is coming out that I'm excited about, which doesn't really happen anymore since every new game sucks. But there's a lot of triggers. And sometimes there's nothing that triggers it. Sometimes I just get a craving for no reason at all. I'm telling you, just being a human already comes along with enough unhealthy, unproductive urges to fight against. You don't want one more. It's actually really draining on your willpower to constantly have to resist these urges. If you've ever tried to quit consuming adult content, it's very similar to that. Okay, so it's really hard to quit, and even when you are successful at quitting, you'll still always have urges that chip away at your limited willpower, and your urges might even be tied to something that on its own is healthy, like spending time out in nature on a nice sunny day. And if you are using it, then you're most likely going to be living with increased anxiety, unnaturally high inhibition, and that's increased anxiety of every kind, by the way, just to be clear. I have social anxiety and health anxiety, and both are way more severe if I'm using. So everything I've covered so far should be enough to effectively make my case, but it gets worse. You've probably heard this term get thrown around, amotivational syndrome or demotivational syndrome. It's basically the idea that using weed will make you lose all your motivation to do anything productive. When I was growing up as a teen browsing internet forums, people acted like amotivational syndrome was a joke. Everybody would say it was just old propaganda and there was no truth behind it whatsoever. Well, as a guy that's been addicted to the herb for over 20 years, it's not just propaganda. Now, I don't want to get into the weeds of whether or not this is a legitimate diagnosable psychological condition. I don't know if it is or not, and I don't really care. But when you are under the influence, you are not going to be doing anything very productive. Maybe sometimes you might enjoy going on a hike or going on a bike ride when you're stoned, or you might practice a musical instrument. It might even make it more enjoyable to do those things, and those are productive hobbies for sure. But think of it like this. You probably would be doing those things anyways. So smoking isn't increasing your motivation, and that's best case scenario. But you're not going to be working on your calculus homework while you're high. You're not going to be doing any mentally difficult work when you're high. And when you got shit to do that you don't really want to do, but you also got a fat blunt in your desk drawer just calling your name, It's really hard to make the right decision in that situation. And again, I know some people are just really responsible and they can do that. They can consistently make the right decision, but you are a fucking moron if you think you're that guy. Statistically speaking, that guy is an anomaly. You are not him, okay? Just statistically, it's very, very unlikely. Also, it's not just while you're under the influence that you'll be less productive, because when you got this habit like I do, it's like any time you're sober, there's a little guy in a Baja hoodie sitting on your shoulder screaming at you to consume more weed. And if you don't have any, then he's screaming at you, telling you to find some more. I know there's been times in my life when you want to know what I did? I remember a couple times when I was either dead broke or there was a drought. I literally took each and every key out of my keyboard because I would usually hold my bowl over the keyboard while I packed it. So I took every key out of my keyboard trying to scrounge up enough shake to get a hit. I searched my entire house looking for change when I was dead broke as a young man, just trying to scrape $10 together so I could buy a dime. I even cleaned out my car. I took out all the floor mats and everything. I cleaned out the glove box. I cleaned out the console, which is something I never did. But that's how dedicated I was to getting high. It was like my singular focus in life. The only time I ever felt actual motivation to do something meticulous or something tedious was if that task got me one step closer to getting baked. And that's why I think it's especially dangerous for men that are struggling with loneliness, because if you don't have any friends and you don't have any girls to talk to, it's really easy to just go all in on weed. Because if you have a social life, you'll probably have some distractions to keep you from focusing on weed 100% of the time. But if you don't have any social life to speak of, and you just spend all day sitting inside your room because you don't have anything else to do, it's really, really easy to think, well, if I'm going to be rotting away in my room all night, might as well enhance the experience. So then you pull out the bong and the rest is history. And you just keep doing that day in and day out, not getting a damn thing done, and you're just rotting. And you're killing any chances you would have had of maybe getting a little spark of motivation to actually go do something productive. It's just very unlikely to happen if you're stoned. And another thing is, when you are under the influence, it raises your social inhibitions, but it lowers your inhibitions to any sort of vice. So like overeating junk food, for example. I can't even begin to calculate the sheer number of calories I would consume on an average day when I was blazing all day. Talking about, I would eat the whole freaking box of Hot Pockets that they sell at Sam's Club, the big box. I would make an entire loaf of bread worth of cinnamon sugar toast, and I would eat it all in one sitting while I watched Degrassi on the living room TV. Then I'd pass out for a couple hours, briefly wake up again at like 4:09 a.m., and then I'd rip the bong a couple times and just pass back out. I'm old, by the way, in case you didn't know. Degrassi was an old documentary about how Drake made it out the hood and regained his ability to walk. I'm just playing. It was a dumb teen drama in the 2000s. But that's how I was living my life on weed. It was just like a never-ending slosh of dopamine seeking. Just always trying to find the next piece of slop to shove down my throat, the next video game to play, the next adult video to watch. That's another thing about how weed lowers your inhibitions to partaking in vices. If you have a corn addiction, like 99% of chronically lonely men do, then get ready to jerk it until it falls off, because you will not be able to resist. It is too easy a thing to do. Like, I'm telling you, weed just makes you unable to resist making all of the worst decisions over and over again. It just turns you into a hedonistic, pleasure-seeking machine. It's not a good way to live your life. I know some of you might feel like, well, so what? My life couldn't possibly get any worse, so I might as well just toke up and enjoy it. But the thing is, and again, so many testimonials you can find online with people talking about this, but it's like when you're smoking all day, every day, after a while, it's like you're not even getting high anymore. You physically are, though, but it's just not interesting anymore. It's not fun anymore. But you do still get the heightened anxiety. You still get all the bad parts, but you stop getting the euphoria and everything that made you want to keep doing it in the first place. But by the time you get to that point, it's really hard to stop. You can be fully aware of how it's not even fun anymore, but it's still hard to stop. You still just keep doing it anyways, even if the whole time you're doing it, you're thinking, why am I doing this? I don't even enjoy this. It's really hard to quit. I cannot stress that enough. The only times I have been able to quit for any significant period of time is like I mentioned earlier, when I moved to another state where I just didn't have access to it for a while. And then more recently, when I started taking care of my baby cousin, I don't want to even have it anywhere around him. So that makes it easier for me to just not keep any at the house. But willpower alone was never enough for me. I'm pretty sure that's how it is for most people. Just willpower alone, that's not going to be enough to quit this stuff. Okay, it's addictive. It's really addictive. So if you're like me and you're a guy with no social life, no girlfriend, no wife, and also especially if you're unemployed, all of those factors put you in a particularly vulnerable position when it comes to the devil's lettuce. It's really not worth it to even try it. And if you're listening to this right now and you do it from time to time, but you feel like you got a good handle on it, I'm telling you, be careful. For real, be careful. It sneaks up on you. You probably won't realize it's a problem until it's too late. And then it's going to be really hard to turn things around. If you found anything I said in this video thought-provoking, or if you thought it was entertaining, please check out some of my other videos. There's also some secret videos you can watch for free on my Patreon, so check that out. Thank you for watching. I'll see you next time.